The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
This is not so much a question, actually, so maybe we should include this in the... Well, we are kind of including it in the preamble now, because I've started talking about it, Kev. Andy Brim wrote us a message. Said, Kev is right. So you're right, Kev. There used to be hedgehog-flavoured crisps. Oh, you were talking about
knew it.
Hedgehog-flavoured
I
crisps?
even put a picture of it on Facebook.
Made that up.
No.
However, if memory serves, they were actually hedgehog and mackerson. Mackerson?
What, with slippers?
Smith's crisps, I think. Last time I even remember seeing a packet, must be around 1983.
Yeah.
All the best, Andy,
right.
age 55 and 3 months. It's important to give your age when you remember stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, do you remember,
existed.
Do you remember Cabana bars?
Yes.
That was my favourite chocolate bar, and they discontinued those, you see.
Yeah, they were great, weren't they?
Cabana bars were lovely. They were like a little slither of... there was coconut and then a red piece of jam going through the middle.
Oreos are vegan, you know.
Are they? Cabana bars would have been as well, wouldn't they?
Probably. And Chewits are as well.
No, because anything that's dairy milk is not, is it?
Well, no, true. But they don't have to be used. It could be using oat milk, or it could be using coconut milk.
Yeah.
Or
I know what my granddad would think about all this now. He used to own a confectionery shop. He'd be like, Granddad, used to, wonderful staying at Granddad's shop. Although I always slept on a bed that was above the tobacco store and the money.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure how safe that was.
Not much has changed.
The FujiCast.
Well, I don't sleep on the money. I wish I did. Can you imagine that? A feathered bed of money. Anyway. So, welcome along again. As always, star of the show today is going to be you and your questions. On anything loosely photo related. Tech is nice. It's been really nice, by the way. The last couple of weeks we've been getting some new names, which is fabulous. The show lives on your questions. Send them in to click@fujicast.co.uk. Mention to the private Facebook group as well. If you haven't become a part of this, you should do. It's been a real community of like-minded folk now, which is fantastic. So a mention to them as well. Still, please no mic drop pictures where you simply post something with some EXIF data. At least give us a little background. Doesn't need to be an essay, but it does need to say more than I just dropped this here to show how good I am, and then ran. And also, we love those conversation starters. Talking of which, let's start with the conversation starter. You can launch with this week's first question.
Okay, this is from Ben Race, and he says, that's a cool name, isn't it? Ben Race, I like that. Vroom. When shooting for fun... When shooting for fun, for a long time I've been using a small and embarrassingly old compact Canon camera. Right. Brilliant in its day, but probably now destined for a museum. Your show has encouraged me to think Fuji, and I find myself with a little pot of money to invest in a cool toy. That just makes me think that he's a leprechaun. A little pot of money. I have a little pot of money.
Found a pot of money.
In a cool toy that I'd like to use for trying my hands at street stuff and for family pictures. And then he goes on to say, I hear rumours of a replacement for the X100F. Should I wait? Or would that be a good shout right now? Cheers, Ben in windswept Dartmouth.
What would be a good shout? What, an F?
Get one, an X100F now.
X100F, yeah. Okay, all right.
Honestly, I say this with all hands on all my hearts. I have no idea. Zero idea whatsoever.
Really?
Things might have changed by the time this episode is live, but I really don't know. X100, boom, and no. Nothing.
So if you had a pot of cash and you wanted to get into the Fuji thing.
His question is, should he buy one now or should he wait and see if another one is released?
Oh, I see.
That's his question.
Oh, right, okay.
So I have no idea if another one is coming. My personal...
If we weren't talking about the possibility of another one coming, what would you be saying?
Get an X100F.
Would you?
Yeah. But of course, he mentions his embarrassingly old Canon compact camera. But maybe if you're still getting the pictures from your embarrassingly old Canon compact, then carry on using it.
Compact. You're talking a different language.
The crux of the question is there another X100 coming? Of course, there probably will be. I have literally no idea when, and I mean that. And so go for one now.
Okay.
Or wait. It's up to you.
All right.
Clean that up.
Yeah. I forgot to mention at the start, by the way, we have two disaster stories coming up. We decided in a program meeting that lasted approximately 5 seconds with a cup of coffee, the disaster stories will go at the end of the show. So, in fact, we've got two disaster stories coming up today. But on the disaster theme, if you like, here's something from Mark Bodie. Gentlemen, so not trying to be all macabre, I hope you have a very long life. Not quite sure.
What's this? Where's this going?
Where this story is actually going, or this question. But do either of you have a contingency plan in place for your work and personal photographs should the worst happen? Personally, as an amateur, I don't have any kind of plan. When I finally pass on, my pictures are likely to die with me, or at best, sit on a dusty hard drive in a family member's drawer somewhere. Would it be better to bequeath all the thousands of images in a will? This is one of those odd things I've always thought about. It's not like this is the weirdest question we've ever had. But it's a good question. It's just one of those odd things I've always thought about. It's not like any camera gear that can easily be sold on. Anyway, keep up the stellar work, and here's to many, many more years. Well, I suppose if you think about it,
another day closer to being dead.
There's a jingle for everything.
It's a great question, though, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely brilliant question. Not something I've thought about, I have to say.
Would you bequeath your pictures?
Well, I guess by the virtue of the fact that all of my equipment would go to the current Mrs. Kev.
Yeah.
Then.
Oh, she'd have moved on by then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Her and Jeff Goldblum probably won't be interested in them.
She's already salivating at the thought.
So by inference, they would go that direction, I guess.
Depends how important you think your pictures will be. I mean, funnily enough, Vivian Maier probably never thought her pictures would be very important at all.
Yeah.
So much so,
and look what happened
she
to
didn't
her.
develop them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. Like, really interesting. I don't think that... your personal family photos, which is, I presume, what we're talking about here. We're not talking about any kind of commercial stuff and all that, because the clients get all of that. They will you'll print some during your life. Some will go onto Facebook, which then will be shared elsewhere. They'll get onto phones. They'll get onto walls and prints and little photo books that we both do for our family every year. That kind of stuff. You pick the best for those. Presumably, they will the ones that will stick around, and the 10 million other ones.
Old family photos are fascinating to look through. Have you ever been to a photographic fair and you've seen old pictures and you think, that's...
I've bought
I could
loads.
spend hours looking at those pictures.
Must have...
And old postcards.
I must
like
have 5,000 old pictures.
Other people's.
People I've never, ever met before. Never seen. Buy them off eBay all the time.
Do you?
Yeah.
I never knew you did that.
And I don't do it for any particular reason. I do it to save the pictures. Seriously, they're usually from house salvage or something like that.
Yeah.
And the lot is that the description is normally 2,500 pictures of a family, various places, vacations, school reunions, blah blah blah.
Have you ever seen something you shouldn't have seen in there?
No, I very rarely look through them, to be totally honest with you. Yeah. But no, your mind. Get out of the gutter, son.
I just wondered.
No.
Yeah.
But
do you remember when Boots used to stick pictures on a lovely story? Boots used to stick a little sticker on your pictures that said, "This one's suitable for enlargement." Okay, there was a lovely story about somebody sent in a picture of himself wearing not too much clothes, and somebody at Boots had a bit of a sense of humour, and over his had stuck the sticker, "This one's suitable for enlargement." I've got a little.
Have you got a little one as well?
No.
That's what you said.
No, I don't mean like that. I've got little pictures at the back here. Now, this is the sort of thing you're talking about. This is a photo. Do you remember photo cubes?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mum and Dad used to have photo cubes, and I've kept this one. Look, that's me being playing cowboys or something.
Oh, look at all that hair.
I know. And that's Dad's old car, an old Vauxhall Victor. Do you remember Vauxhall? There's me cleaning the van with Dad. I mean, that's the sort. I love looking through
absolutely.
old stuff like that.
I have all our old family pictures, like from my mum given to me.
Yeah,
I have all of those, and of course, there's no such thing as digitals.
No,
there's still quite a lot of negatives, but there's it's all prints.
That was me throwing the cube down, by the way.
That's why I love getting these pictures of total strangers.
Yeah.
So those pictures you just showed me are typical of what I have.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Although I have no connection to them whatsoever. No. Maybe I should do a YouTube film about that one day.
I think it would be an amazingly interesting YouTube film. I think I honestly
maybe we could find some of the people.
Well, that would be almost impossible, though, wouldn't it? Really, unless anybody recognised.
I don't know. My little vegan brain is overloading itself.
A friend of ours did a very similar project for her. In fact, I think it was Giles's daughter. She did a project for her art at school. She collected old postcards and contacted some of the people that had sent the postcards after all these years. That was a fascinating. Yeah. Well,
I love that kind of sociology-based stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark
very good.
Bodie, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Initially, I thought, what a strange question, but actually, I think I've enjoyed that more than.
There will be a lot of people thinking on
Yes.
their morning dog walks or whatever this Monday morning.
Yeah, good question. Very good question. More of that kind, please. The book review is back in a moment by, and we mean this, popular request. Before that, a mention for this week's guest, Cathal McNaughton, a Pulitzer Prize winner, no less, for images that we'll talk about in the interview. But despite the fact Cathal has travelled the globe for Reuters, telling the most amazing, sometimes harrowing stories, I garnered this quote from him. Some of my favourite images have been taken within a few miles of my house, which for Cathal is beautiful Ireland. I think there's a lesson in that, to see more of what's around you as the story, rather than thinking you have to travel thousands of miles for it.
Yeah.
So we promised this week we would add a book review. So we're going to bring it, but we did. Well, it's not so much reviews, but really bringing books to your attention. We did used to do this, and then for some reason we dropped it. I don't know why, because people often say, I liked it when you read through a few books and suggested a few.
The reason why we thought about talking a little bit more about some of our favourite books is because we get a lot of comments on Facebook,
aren't there?
you know, and people seem to be getting into the kind of
books.
That's the word I'm looking for. We're talking about books, right? So it's good. It's all good.
So the first one you brought in then.
So the first one I'm actually going to talk about is it's got a bit of a tricky name. It's called The Ballad of Sexual Dependency, and it's by Nan Goldin. So
why's that a tricky name?
Well, it's connotations, isn't it? The Ballad of Sexual Dependency.
Right. No, I think it's very obvious. It's like a sledgehammer, this one.
Well, yeah, kind of. I'm just going to show Neil one of the pictures from the book.
Ah.
So you can see my kind of it's
sausage roll, anyone?
Not at all.
Vegan?
It's not. Oh no, it's not reticence to discuss this book because it is an absolute classic.
Yeah.
And so Nan Goldin still is a photographer, and this kind of period
incredible photographer.
Absolutely, is this during the 70s, I think early 80s, where she essentially spent a lot of time with her friends, most of whom, perhaps not most, but many of whom were HIV positive and subsequently passed away.
We talked about her recently.
We have done. Now, The Ballad of Sexual Dependency is it's more than a book. It's an exhibition with the soundtrack. So it's like a photo film, if you like. If you see it properly at an exhibition, it has a soundtrack.
So it's a bit like when you go to, I love it at the Tate Modern, when you have the room that has the televisions laid out, and it's usually very simple, isn't it? It's one screen and everybody's sort of crowded around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Nan Goldin is still a photographer and still working today, and she has she's been quite divisive, I suppose, over the years in terms of opinions, but I love her. And when you look at the pictures in these books, many of them just come across as Kodak snaps, if you like. But that's what the beauty of the book is. That's what the beauty is. It's real life. It's certainly warts and all. There's some very uncomfortable images in this book, but there's some very beautiful images. I'm looking at page 52 now. Mod Kid with Dog, London 1980, and it's a guy. She's thrown a flash. He's stood up against a wall. She's thrown a flash at him. You can see the shadows. There's a little dog jumping up. There's a Hoover in the background. There's some cables. There's an old box on the floor. The door is a bit damaged and stuff. So it's got one of those old-fashioned light switches that you probably still have in your grandparents' house, and it's a nostalgic picture, but it has a whole meaning in the series of the book. Like I say, these are all friends of hers or people that she was involved with. So this is as I flick through the books, as I flick through the book now, you then get some of the more images that are kind of risque, but all with a meaning.
There's a context to it. It's not just nudity for nudity's sake.
No, and it's not. There's very little nudity in it, and that's why I say that.
Well, apart from that one and that one and that one.
The title, it just so happens the pages unfolding over, flicking through it like that. But there's pictures of kids and stuff like that playing around, and it is. I'm just going to go to the final page to tell you how many pages it is. 145-ish or so pages. Beautiful book. It's comes in many versions and variants these days.
You've got the hardback version then.
I have the hardback version.
We'll link to it in the notes.
We will, of course, link to it in the notes. So my book of the week, if you so want to call it that, is The Ballad of Sexual Dependency by Nan Goldin.
Good. Thank you for bringing that one in, Kev. Questions. Actually, it's back to you. Your turn.
Okay, so I have one from Jonathan Clapton. Now, I know Jonathan because...
Eric's son. Yeah.
Jonathan, I photographed his wedding.
Well, Eric.
No, Jonathan.
Oh, right.
Jonathan Clapton.
That'd be clever. He's years older than you.
He goes on to say, avid listener, amateur photographer, and wedding client of Kev's, as well as an attendee on his workshops.
Right.
I can confirm that his follow-on approach to selling seems to be working, as my wife and I have a baby arriving imminently. Now, I know this is from a few months back because the baby is here. And he goes on to say, I'm expecting an email offering his documentary family photography services any day now. Just get my pen and paper, Jonathan. Right, email to Jonathan. Anyway, he goes on to say, having just invested in a new 27-inch display for my MacBook Pro, I've realised that recent photos I thought were perfectly sharp, or at least very usable, are less so on closer inspection on a larger screen. In particular, indoors and lower light shots are somewhat soft and or noisy in contrast to well-lit shots, which I appreciate is typical of higher ISOs, but viewing them on full screen makes this very obvious. My question is, what adjustments do you typically make in Lightroom before you're happy with higher ISO images, and what is the best I can reasonably hope for during post-processing for noise reduction and sharpness for low light images? I'm trying to understand whether it's perhaps my expectations that need to change. Many thanks in advance, Jonathan Clapton. Now, because he's using a monitor on a Macintosh, I think you should answer this question.
What about being sharp? I think it's the worst. I think it's the worst monitor I think you can possibly look at stuff on for color calibration reasons alone. We covered that, didn't we, with Jeremy Dulder? Before Christmas. I don't personally find that a great issue. I think it's expectations.
One thing I would say is I have two screens. I have a 32-inch and a 27-inch, and I'll typically edit my images on the 27-inch because 32-inch is too big. Yeah, and I don't
like seeing them too large.
I'm having to move my head around, to see.
And you start pixel peeping them that large.
Yeah, and also nobody else sees them that large.
No.
Nobody. It's the same with our websites. When you look at your website and it looks beautiful on your 27-inch screen, and then actually you need to realise that 90% of people are going to be looking at them on an iPhone. Or a Huawei. So, I mean, of course you want them to look great on your screen, and especially if you're displaying them at home, but make it a lesson in understanding where the ISO is at in those images, the ones that are too sharp. I mean, basically, if an image is at high ISO, it's likely to be softer because the grain is interfering with the structure of the image. I mean, part of the question Jonathan says is, what's your process in Lightroom? And mine is very straightforward for noise reduction. I never sharpen.
No, I never sharpen.
Never sharpen at all. I think people over sharpen Fujifilm images in Lightroom, and that can lead to the kind of worming effects. I do output sharpening, so when I export my image, I just say to Lightroom.
Oh, so you do some sharpening?
Well, I don't, but Lightroom does it on export.
Right, okay.
So I just use the preset.
But you'd have to add that before you add any grain, wouldn't you?
No.
Otherwise you're going to be sharpening the grain.
Yeah, but I do it right at the very... So it's on export sharpening. So I don't do any sharpening in Lightroom.
Do you add grain?
I don't add grain. No, not necessarily.
Okay, so that answers my question then, because I was thinking if you add grain, then add export sharpening, you're going to be sharpening the grain, which is going to look awful.
Yeah, but the way that Lightroom does it, you're right, but the way that Lightroom does it is that it algorithmically looks at the structure of the image, I believe. That's why the option is in the output dialog box. Export dialog box. And you have screen, print, glossy, print matte, and I just choose standard for whichever device it's going to.
And how much do you sharpen?
Standard.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
So
never do anything else. But for noise reduction, I typically, if I use smart collections in Lightroom to group my images together based on noise reduction. So I have a 6,400 to 12,800 is one area.
That's similar to the way I do it, yeah.
And I will do minus 50 detail on that for sharpening. For noise reduction. And then I have 2,500 to 2,560 to 3,800 to 6,400. I'll do 40, and then basically they lead their way down. Anything up to 1,000 ISO gets no noise reduction whatsoever.
So up to 1,600. I had a tiny bit in. I can't remember the numbers, to be honest, but it goes to me then 2,000 to 6.4 and 6.4 above.
Yeah, mine are based on stops. So 0 to 1,600 or whatever, then 1,600 to 2.8 and blah, blah, blah. So that's it in terms of noise reduction. But Jonathan will know that because he's been on my workflow workshop with me.
Yeah. So. Have you got many workshops coming up this year?
Yes. I've got a few.
Yeah.
Most of the ones depends what time. Yeah, all of the existing ones sold out. So I have put, or I'm soon to put, more on the website. kevinmullinsworkshops.co.uk.
I'm actually planning on doing some documentary wedding ones this year myself.
Ooh.
Yeah, I am. More news to follow.
Yes, good for you.
Nick Osborne. Hi Neil, hi Kev. This week is a double first for me, my debut wedding photography gig and my first ever email to FujiCast. Well, you're very welcome, Nick. You guys are inspiring. Well, Kev is engaging. Absolute pleasure to listen to, even in your grumpy rant mode. Yeah, yada yada. You haven't had many of those since you've been proper vegan.
Oh no, it's.
They seem to be your sort
my
of.
whole body is vibrantly excited about the effervescence of life.
Yeah, I mean, look at your skin. Amazing. I'm still buzzing from the experience of shooting this first wedding with a friend on the beautiful Brancaster coast. Oh, that's lovely. The couple were really nice people. The other guests were equally lovely. The weather was ideal. And to top it off, we somehow managed to get a round of applause and a shout out of thanks from the DJ as we finally left the wedding venue in the evening. Sounds like they serenaded you out. And now, leaving the building, the wedding photographers. Anyway, we fully intended to be passive observers in the background. This would be your worst nightmare, wouldn't it, Kev?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Kevin is leaving the building. Everybody line up. We're going to do a little sparkler thing for him as he leaves. We fully intended to be passive observers in the background and certainly didn't seek this kind of recognition. And not sure we deserved it either, he says in brackets. But nonetheless, it was lovely to get this kind of unexpected praise at the end of a long day. I certainly don't get that level of backslapping when I do my day job in the office. Now, I know Kev doesn't even say goodbye when he leaves a gig. However, my question to you both is, what has been the most surprising or rewarding moment you've encountered when leaving a wedding? Best wishes, Nick and St Ives. It's a lovely part of the world in Cambridgeshire. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, usually I'm as the old Matt Bianco song said, sneaking out the back door with a grin.
Matt Bianco.
Do you remember Matt Bianco? Get out your lazy bed.
Yeah, I do remember.
Do you remember the war, Grandad?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Even though I don't purposely say goodbye, I don't purposely not say it either. You know, I just don't.
You're a bit grumpy.
If I'm going past them and they're by the door or whatever, then I'll speak to them. But I'm not going to.
Might give them a humph.
I'm not going to go and. Drag him off the dance floor and tell him I'm off. So
you do the fist bumps and stuff like that.
Smashed it today. Smashed it.
I am awesome.
I don't know what's the most. I've been given gifts.
Yeah,
I have been given
at the wedding.
Yeah. I've been given gifts.
Somebody just lifts up. Here, have this chandelier.
Yeah. So here,
hotel won't mind.
Here, have this wedding gift. I don't like it.
Yeah,
we just take the name off right yours, isn't it? Yeah, I've been given champagne and whiskey and stuff. I've been given a tip once. Cash tip.
Really?
In an envelope.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never received a cash tip in an envelope.
I've often been, don't forget to take some wedding cake for your kids and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I often leave with wedding cake.
Oh, I never take it.
I do. And that is the worst habit. That's got to go. But then usually it ends in absolute disaster. I left a wedding in London just before Christmas, and they had some really nice. I know that I'm sorry. Close your ears now. It was that's not even the right animal. It was really nice pulled pork bap, and there was loads of lovely sauce with it. The first thing I did was bit into it, and it went everywhere. It went all down my front, over the steering wheel, fell on the floor, all against the windscreen. God knows how I managed to make that much mess. So that's probably a good habit to stop. I don't know. I don't really think it's the best, most surprising, rewarding moment you've encountered.
I certainly haven't been fanfared out like that, though. That would.
I did have the best. I went to a particularly kind of laddie kind of wedding, and they were taking the rise out of me all day long. And then when it came to the best man speech, they did a Neo, Neo, Neo when they were doing all the thank yous. That was a bit embarrassing.
I have never had that, but I've been called out a couple of times during the speeches.
Yeah.
And usually I just go bright puce
colour. Do you like being called out during the speeches? I always, there's part of me that thinks You sit there, you're waiting, and everybody gets thank you. So they thank the chef, obviously. They thank the waiting staff. They thank the driver. They thank the dressmaker, the florist. Me next.
Yeah.
And finally, I'd like to. And you think it's going to be me. I'd like to say thank you to my wife. And you think, oh, right, okay.
Yeah. No, I also agree with that. However, on the occasions where they have said thank you to me, I've just gone bright purple.
As much as you'd like to be thanked for it. Equally, you're quite happy to be.
And I wonder sometimes
the observer in the corner
if they don't, because you're there, and perhaps they realise that it's a call out thing, and so maybe they don't.
Might be it, yeah.
Who knows? I don't know.
So there we go, Nick. I think you've trumped us both on that one.
Okay, so I have a question from Helen Fennell, and she says, "I hope all is well with you."
Oh, Helen Fennell's coming along to the 30th birthday thing.
Thank you.
So no, first birthday thing. So on the 30th.
Thank you for such a top-notch podcast. I always feel
Sorry, was I interrupting you?
Photographically invigorated after listening. I was recently asked by someone who has just taken up photography as a hobby what they should do to improve. In my mind, the honest answer, like anything, is practice. Sports people train, musicians practice their instruments, and artists sketch.
True.
Due to security and safety reasons in my day job, I can't always take a camera with me everywhere I go. Ooh, she must be a spy.
Wow, I'm just fascinated now to know what she does.
I always think when people on workshops say to me, I work in the civil service, I think, well, you would either say you're a teacher or a librarian, or so if you just say I work in the civil service, you're definitely a spy.
Don't you peer out the window and see if they've got an Aston Martin with a rocket launcher in the car park?
Keep an eye, see if there's anybody else in the room watching. Anyway, sorry, Helen. You're probably not a spy, although you might be. Nothing wrong with it. Perhaps she lives near GCHQ. I have developed a habit of trying to formulate compositions in my mind, even when I don't have a camera, to try and exercise my creative eye. I was wondering whether you practice photography daily, and even when not shooting for work, see, spy. Yeah. And whether you had any approaches you used to keep up your skills.
Does your pen take pictures, Helen?
No, what's that? That's the wrong thing.
No, you're thinking of that's a dance song. Is it in the hit parade?
It's yes, I actually do exactly what Helen's talking about. Not so much with the compositions, but usually when I'm in supermarkets or something like that, I'm usually thinking that'd be a brilliant picture.
Oh, I thought
for a minute, get my Martin Parr head on and kind of click my hands.
Are you tempted to whip out a camera and take a picture in a supermarket?
I would love to. I would love a supermarket commission would be my favourite, but you can't just go in a supermarket and start taking pictures.
How would you go about that if you had a supermarket commission? What kind of kit would you use, and how would you do it?
Ouch, don't know. I'd want to do it from a comical point of view. I'd like to do it from the way Martin Parr would see it,
right?
So, which means that Sainsbury's or Tesco's are probably not likely to ask for those types of pictures.
No,
because it's going to be, it's going to be
it's certainly not going to be Waitrose.
The dodgy guy in his dodgy Mac dropping custard on the floor or something. Huh? Don't you wear a dodgy Mac when you go shopping?
Absolutely.
No, I'd be looking for the I don't know, the weird stuff,
irreverent bits.
Yeah, I suppose irreverent. Yeah,
I like airports for that reason. I'd love that. That would be my ultimate project to be commissioned for. Would be to spend a month at an airport photographing the comings and goings and the people hugging and the arguments across the desk sometimes and just airport life.
Yeah,
and the guy that's sort of resting his head because he's just put 3,000 suitcases on an Airbus 380.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that would be great. But I mean, from Alan's point of view, what do you do to kind of try and keep your practice in, I suppose? And that's it. I do often find myself, if I'm not with a camera, I'm somewhere where I'm not taking pictures, thinking that would be a great picture. And I will occasionally find myself kind of blinking my eyes.
Do you? Well, as in shutter?
Yeah.
Are you on a 50th there, or
35 mil?
Don't you look
1/125th of a second. My eyes.
You've only got to be careful if just one of your eyes is shutting on a 50th. People might think you're perving them. Are you winking at me? No, I'm a shutter. I've got a slow shutter speed.
My eyesight is 2,800 ISO.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, I think my eyesight definitely, my ISO's gone down. Definitely, I need a speed light.
I think we're at age, isn't it?
I think so. Right, to this week's guest. Cathal McNaughton is one of those photojournalists you kind of feel might be somewhat out of your grasp when it comes to requesting and being granted an interview. He is the photographer's photographer. He started at the Irish News age 16. He was attending riots, shootings, and and the kind of stories you wouldn't expect an apprentice to have access to. He was certainly not desk-bound. One of his first solo assignments was the aftermath of the Omar bombing, which, for those too young to remember or geographically didn't digest this as a newsfeed in your country, saw 29 people lose their lives, plus 2 unborn children. And this action was carried out by a dissident Republican force opposed to, ironically, the peace process. Cathal made a picture, a black and white photograph of a young boy at one of the funerals wiping away a tear. It's 22 years since that dreadful event, and since then Cathal has travelled extensively, resulting in the kind of work that has won him an admiration in the photographic community at large, and recognised his work with a Pulitzer Prize. More about that shortly. This week's guest is Cathal McNaughton, and we're very grateful for his time. Cathal, your introduction to photography, and in particular photojournalism, was organic to a degree. I mean, you grew up during a period where political unrest in Northern Ireland was at a peak. I mean, you'd watch photojournalists come and go from across the world to Ireland. But what was it that drew you finally to the way of life that you witnessed?
The lure, the excitement that drew me to it, as I think a lot of people get drawn to it. But what kept me at it was wanting to tell a story and wanting to get the story out there and across to as many people as possible. There was a certain empathy, I think, towards people that were maybe less fortunate than myself. And in latter years, I've felt it's quite an empowering thing to do, to tell people's story, or to be the voice of people that don't maybe have the opportunity or the possibility to share their story and let the world know what's happening. Because generally, what I'm photographing it can be seen as quite negative things, and there are issues that need to be highlighted and dealt with by people a greater force than me, but I can be the sort of conduit for them to get their story out at times.
I know your father had a real influence in you taking this path into photography. He was a very artistically practical man by all accounts, wasn't he? How important was that initially to you?
As any photojournalist knows, it's not a career path that most people would be encouraged to go on, because it's not like a lawyer or an accountant or something. But my father is, as you said, he's a very artistic man. He's got a background in wood turning and wood carving, but he was always at something. He was always at calligraphy or art. All his hobbies always surrounded around something that was artistic. So he encouraged me whenever he seen that I had a love and a passion for photography. It's not something he actually did. It's one of the few hobbies he never took up. What some people's fathers and that are like, they're at a different hobby every few years, but it's something he never did. But he was always there encouraging me, and at no point did he ever say, could you not get something, maybe a more stable job or whatever. He was always right there behind me, supporting me through all the tough times, although he's not too happy with the fact some of the places I go and some of the stories I cover, but I tend to keep a lot of that away from him.
Now, Brendan Murphy, a very much acclaimed press photographer and then editor for the Irish News, he saw something in you, didn't he? He took you under his wing. He was an enormous figure in photography during the Troubles, and there can't have been many better or more appropriate to have worked with. And two, what was his advice to you, and how did he help you along the road initially?
He was the driving force behind me really at the start. He was my mentor, still is, and Brendan was always there to give you advice, pretty harsh advice at times. He didn't hold back. He was extremely critical, but because I had so much respect for the man, and still do, it seems to have stood me in good stead. So when I started in the traditional route of cleaning the darkroom and deving the films. I remember the highlight of the start of my career was being allowed to. There was a wine column in the Irish News, the paper I worked for at the time, and it was every Thursday. So every Wednesday, a photograph had to be taken of a bottle of wine. And I remember it was many, many months of watching this being done and deving other people's film of this wine that I was allowed to graduate to photographing this wine bottle. And I remember the first time I did it, I was so excited and I made a complete mess of it, which is quite funny looking back on it because, well, an inanimate object in an office is pretty easy to photograph, but I still made a mess of it. So that was the start. So he kept me grounded at the beginning, and but he helped me build the foundations that my career and knowledge is based on now. So he was a great influence on me.
We're going to kind of fast forward through your career, and earning a place within an agency such as Reuters is, of course, a dream for many photojournalists, and then becoming chief photographer in India for the agency. I mean, how did the association with Reuters form?
Well, after working in London for quite a while with a couple of different agents, I worked for the Press Association and then the Daily Telegraph. I moved back to Ireland and was given the opportunity to become their photographer covering Ireland and wherever else they wanted to send me. And so after a period of a few years working there, then the opening came up to go to India. And I applied for it and got it, and that's what saw me in Delhi for the next few years.
Were you prepared for what lay ahead?
I was warned or given advice before I went that nothing would prepare you for India. There was no way you could be prepared for it, no matter how well travelled or how many different locations you had worked in around the world. And I didn't really think this was true until I got there, and then I realised just how difficult it is. Just waking up in the morning and going about your day before you even take pictures can be an effort in India. You know, logistically and environmentally, India takes a toll on you without doing anything. If you're passive, you're still being assaulted by your senses and mentally. So, yeah, India was an amazing opportunity and one which I really relished and loved. An amazing place to work.
I spoke to a photojournalist earlier today about the fact I was chatting with you, and he said, he's the wire photographer you would want to be, working for one of the biggest news organisations in the world, an inspiration, but also flies under the radar. Is that a fair description of how you operate, do you think?
Yeah, well, I like to be quite low-key. I'm not really one that would hog the limelight too much, although now because of the way things are moving on, I'm having to push myself forward and put myself into get on the people's radar. It's just the way things work. But yeah, I like to go about my business quietly. There's a lot of people look for the praise and adulation, and they thrive on it. Of course, I have an ego. I like any positive comments I can get, but I like to just work away quietly and do my own thing, and then let my work speak for itself, really, and hopefully it does.
Here's a word we use quite often, actually, Cathal, the democratization of photography. How has that affected you, that smartphones and so on and so forth, and everybody's a street journalist now?
Well, I've had to embrace it. There's no point in being a Luddite about things and saying, I wish it was film photography and we were in the darkroom. That's just not the way things are anymore. Technology is advancing. The way people consume their media is changing at all times, and you have to go with it. You can sit by and complain, but that's not going to change anything. So I'm embracing it. I've joined Instagram and what have you, as you know, by taking a wee look at some of my pictures on Instagram, and I photograph or film my dog in my van. Like everybody else, and photograph my food. So what can you do? Do you sit by and just say nothing, or do you jump on board and try and change it from within? So that's the approach I'm taking.
Well, one thing you've had to develop is providing more than simply the stills, because I know you think of yourself as a journalist, don't you? You have to interview as well as shoot. Video's more important than ever. Those additional skills are really important now, aren't they, in this business? Yeah,
well, that's just part and parcel now. There's no such thing as a photographer as such. Any photographers I know, even working for the newspapers and the agencies, we are all journalists. People are wanting more for their money now. A lot of the agencies we're working for, they want you to be able to be a journalist. They expect you to be able to shoot video as well. So it's something you have to embrace. And if you want to make a career of it, you have to do it. So
a really important part of your career, I mean, it's all been important, but this for particular reasons of late, the mass exodus of the Rohingyans from Myanmar became news, and the world finally became conscious of it in 2017, although I think I'm right to say the refugees have been fleeing from persecution a good few years before that. And I read you had a particular passion in this particular story. It was a story, and I'm going to quote you fervently wanted to do. And I wonder why that was.
There was just something that was drawing me to the story. I think every photographer maybe has got an assignment that they find themselves drawn to in a particular period of their life that they feel they must cover. And I fought and asked to go and cover that until eventually they relented and let me go and shoot it. And when I was there, and even subsequently, it's something I am very, very proud of, that I went and I shot it and I did it justice, I think. I hope I did those people justice and helped highlight the plight to the rest of the world. And me and my colleagues at the time, because I was part of a team, a very good close-knit team at Reuters that went and covered the Exodus with empathy. Sometimes you can go to these stories and it can be almost like a box-ticking exercise, which I know sounds terrible, but that's the reality whenever you're shooting assignments day to day. But this is something that was done with a lot of empathy and passion and sympathy. So it's something I'm really proud of, and I'll be proud of it till the end of my days.
It was photographic coverage that saw you awarded, quite rightly, with a Pulitzer Prize for photography in 2018. Did that come as a surprise? I mean, I know it's very much a team effort as well, and you're very quick to remind people that it was a team that won this as much as anything.
Well, it's always a surprise. If you were to think or expect to win a Pulitzer Prize, I think you're setting yourself up for a life of misery. You can say you've won the Pulitzer Prize, but you don't win a Pulitzer. I think you're awarded the Pulitzer. It's not something that you want to hold up and celebrate some terrible plight that you've highlighted. With being awarded a Pulitzer comes a certain responsibility. So it was a great honor. But saying that, there was other people that were shortlisted with work that was every bit as important and photographs that were every bit as good as ours. It's just on the day our team managed to be awarded the Pulitzer, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
Does it sit comfortably for those telling the stories to win prizes? I mean, you mentioned the word plight. Essentially winning prizes for pictures of plight. I mean, it's uncomfortable me asking, but it's something I've mused over because there's such juxtaposition, isn't there, Cathal?
Yeah, and it's something I have a problem with as well. I didn't actually enter the Pulitzer. It was we were entered by somebody else. It was on our behalf. That's the thing. I can rest easy with this particular accolade because I know I went and shot it with the right reasons. Some people go to these war zones or go and cover particular stories, and at the forefront of their mind is World Press Photo or Pulitzer Awards. And to me, I have a real issue with that because you're really doing it for the wrong thing. Photography isn't all about taking away. Some people go to a particular assignment and all they do is take. Photographers, they're just taking things and they want to be awarded things. You've got to give something back. The reason we were there was to show the world what was happening. There's plenty of people we know, they shoot specifically for competitions, and that is a road to mental health problems. And you're going to be sorely disappointed and you'll never be satisfied because you're never going to win every competition that you want to enter, and you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Now, on the subject of empathy, I've asked photojournalists before about empathy or separation in context of the camera being between you and your subject, and how you deal with situations where your job is obviously to tell the story photographically. That's important, but you feel like you want to maybe down cameras and pitch in to somehow help. And some of the pictures from Cox's Bazaar spring to mind, images of the scuffles that you've made during the food distribution and mothers holding newborn sick children. There's one image, Cathal, of a young child literally pulling himself through mud in your collection that just won't leave me. And what about that separation between telling a story and wanting to physically pitch in? Is it hard?
Yes, it can be difficult. You hear photographers, journalists saying, well, I have a job to do. If you get too emotionally involved, you can't do your job. That's okay to an extent, but I'm a father, I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm just like everybody else. So there were numerous occasions in Cox's Bazaar when I did put my cameras down and I did help people, not because I'm better than anybody else, but just because that was the right thing to do. I remember one incident where myself and another photographer from the Associated Press at the food distribution centre, it was so chaotic and so badly managed that we put our cameras down and started to take control of the situation ourselves and distribute the food ourselves. Otherwise, it was going to turn into a complete riot situation. That's when, humanity becomes more important than just a photograph. You have to be, when you close your eyes at night, you have to be able to sleep and live with yourself. I always think of what would my mother think. I know that seems like a very simplistic way of looking at it, but what would my mother think if she knew that I was here and there was people suffering or whatever and I wasn't doing something to help?
What's photographic life now? You're back in Ireland at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm back in Ireland. I'm back here with my dog and my van. Life sort of got in the way about a year ago. Well, two things happened. I was denied entry back into India after picking up the Pulitzer Prize for work that I shot in Kashmir, although that's a long story. But at the same time, I had a family member became sick, and so I came home, and I'm now at home where I need to be at the minute. Yeah. So I stepped back from Reuters and had to focus on my family, which is always the most important thing. Mm. But now, through even things like this podcast and that, I still need to feed myself. I still need to feed my dog. Guinness isn't cheap. So I need to start making a living or paying for, rent and things like everybody else. So I'm looking at a new direction that I wasn't exactly, I wasn't on this path maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, but I find myself in a different path and I'm just going to have to get on with things.
Well, one of those paths is your workshops, mainly on the subject of street work. Though I get the feeling that these are courses as much about reportage and photojournalism because you're involved. What sort of challenges do you present to those attending to prepare them for working on the street? And you've got a couple coming up, actually, February and March.
Yeah, I've actually been taking workshops on and off for a few years, but I never really advertised them that much. It was more word of mouth. But now I've had to embrace it all because it's going to be something that I have to focus on a lot more. Whenever I started doing a bit of research about who was holding these street photography workshops, and I looked at their portfolios or their work, quite often I was shocked at the standard of some of their work because you get a lot of wannabe photographers. I know this isn't going to be maybe go down well with some people. I'm not talking about all street photographers, but there's a lot of people out there who think, that have one career and then decide, what, at the weekends, I like taking photos and things. I'm going to start opening up a few workshops. That really annoys me. Mm. I've got 20 years experience or whatever on the walking the streets. There are rules of engagement. I think that you need to learn. There are ways of dealing with people. It's a skill in it. It's a skill in its own. And I'm wanting to offer that chance to people, a chance that I didn't actually get whenever I was younger. I would have loved the opportunity to go out with somebody that had maybe a bit of a career behind them and ask them questions and to be shown what to do. And it's something I'm passionate about. There is nobody more passionate about photography than amateur photographers or people that are enthusiastic about photography. They're the people that maybe have more understanding of f-stops and pixels and what have you than anybody else. Yeah. And so whenever I talk to these people, it sort of gives me a love for photography again. I get a lot from them because they are really, really interested. In my previous life as chief photographer in Reuters and that, a lot of the other photographers you would talk to would become very jaded and a lot of the enthusiasm and passion has gone. But I enjoy, it kind of is reinvigorating me as well after so many years feeding the great big news wire machine.
I read too, mainly through Instagram, that you're very much into van life. You're a van lifer. And the dog features, or what's dog's name? Sorry, I should know this.
The dog is called Murphy.
Murphy, of course, because you talk about Murphy. But Murphy features on there. Usually Murphy's right at the start of a shot and it pans away from Murphy and then back to him again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, Murphy, whenever I came back, Murphy was, sometimes I say, did I save Murphy or did Murphy save me? Because Murphy was for the chop. He was a sheepdog that has got absolutely no interest in sheep. So I was told that Murphy was going to expire the next day. So I went and rescued Murphy. But to be honest, I think Murphy's rescued me. He's helped me over the past year as well, although he is a pain in the ass. But yeah, so Murphy has been with me all over Europe in my van.
It's funny, Murphy has a look of indifference sometimes when you address him.
Yeah, Murphy's his own person, really. I don't think he shows any gratitude at any time for anything I do, but that keeps me grounded, I think.
Our thanks this week to Cathal McNaughton for his time in recording that interview with us for the FujiCast. Of course, if you'd like more information about him, his work and his travels, then check out the show notes where Kev will put all the appropriate links that he diligently makes and records each week for the podcast. And remember, if you have any guests or anybody that you think would be appropriate for the FujiCast, including actually yourself, if you're working on a personal project or something, let us know about it. Right, back to questions. We got your disasters coming up. We've got 2 this week toward the end of the show. But questions, you launch, Kev.
Okay, so I got one from Barry Markham, and Barry says, "Hello, Neil and Kev. Love the podcast and the banter between you two. Yada, 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 yada." Quick question. A quick gear question.
A gear question?
A gear question. I listened to the interview with Keith Bernstein, shooting film pictures, and now I know the job I want to do when I grow up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it would have been a good job.
Yes. Keith Bernstein, by the way, was the guy that shoots film stills, yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, there was no discussion about what equipment he uses to shoot film pictures. Can you tell me anything about how he does this?
Well, you know this.
I know the answer, even though you did the interview, because I met Keith at a convention once.
You did, yeah. You spoke on the same stage.
We did,
Keith,
indeed. Yeah. In fact, we both wore bright red shoes.
I know.
So I went to his talk because it was fascinating, and he shoots with Sony something or other. I think he's what they call a Sony artisan, which is
I think
ambassador.
I think I'm right in saying he's an A7 shooter.
I would imagine it's
not the A9.
Frame. Well, I don't know. Anyway, so he's certainly a Sony shooter, and the reason why he went mirrorless, if I remember rightly from his conversation, is that he used to shoot with DSLR, I think Nikon, but I might be wrong, but have to use a big blimp, which is like a big carrier bag
case that you put the camera in, isn't it? So you can't hear the shutter.
Can't you hear the shutter?
The rolling sound.
So mirrorless is perfect for him, of course, and his flavour of choice is Sony, and he makes amazing pictures from it. So he is a Sony shooter, Keith Bernstein. Yeah. So thanks, Barry. Good question.
Darren Rainshaw, here's a quickie for Kev. I know you really love black and white as a medium and even have a package for clients in your wedding work where they can have all the pictures in either black and white or colour or both. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of having a black and white only service, which I'll make cheaper to draw in some kind of uptake. I love black and white. My dream is to find clients who only want black and white. Any thoughts, Darren?
Well, both you and I have discussed this kind of thing before, haven't we? And my black and white, I offer a discount for people who want just black and white. So I have a similar kind of mindset on it. Very, very few people go for it.
Do they?
Yeah, very, very few people.
Why do you think that is?
I think because weddings are colourful. I think the world we live in, the social media world, the Instagram generation, it's all colour, isn't it?
Do you think lowering the price, though, would help people think, do you know what?
If you lowered it low enough, absolutely. You would. For sure it would sell. But whether it's economically viable, that's the difference. Because, ultimately shooting everything in black and white is more difficult because you have to make more consideration of the light. You have to make more consideration of the exposure. You can see the light. If you're visualizing it in black and white as well, then you can see that light easier. Well, certainly I can. Yeah. But actually, you have to take more consideration of light when you're shooting in black and white, because an image with little light in like in a corner of a wedding room, might look a lot better in color than it does in black and white because there's no contrast, there's no structure to the image. So it can be a bit more difficult. So actually charging less for it kind of is a little bit more is counterintuitive. But point taken, and it's something that both you and I have kind of dabbled with. I think
didn't really work with me actually. I must admit, I thought having the black and white only project, because a lot of people who go to my website see a lot of black and white anyway. They might be more sort of attuned to it and quite like the idea. I've done 2 only black and white weddings in 2019.
Yeah, I've done a couple also. I think
that was it out of all the weddings I shot.
I think that also, remember, we live in a digital world. Everybody, absolutely everybody, takes photos, on whether it's on their phone or on a DSLR or on a mirrorless camera, whatever. They all know that you can convert colour pictures to black and white.
Yeah.
They know that.
Yeah.
So what they don't know is the difficulties of metering for the light and seeing the shadows and making a black and white image from an artistic point of view, rather than it just being a colour image that you converted to black and white afterwards. So if you can get the message to them that it's not just a case of I'm going to just, I'm holding ransom the colour images. You're actually making it a creative decision based on the pictures you're taking.
Yeah.
That's the message to get across.
Could feel like that, I suppose.
Yeah, it would do. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. Why would it not feel like that?
What black and white? I'm just trying to look on my phone here. Oh, I found it. I use Carbon. Is it Carbon I use for black and white processing on my iPhone? Which is great app.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So there's your answer. Your question, Kev.
Okay, I have a question from Gavin Caldwell, and he says, I would like to combine my Fuji photography along with my this is definitely a question for you, Neil. I would like to combine my Fuji photography, although it doesn't have to be Fuji, along with my intended first podcast.
Oh.
I just find it very bewildering with all of the various things you have to do in order to create a podcast. Any tips on starting a photo podcast for 2020?
In terms of podcast, okay.
I got an answer.
Have you?
My answer is find a Neil. Find a Neil and everything is simple.
You can pay me to do it. I'd be very happy to. I'm already producing a few podcasts for other people now. Doing your own podcast, I mean, for a start, don't expect it to be something that's going to
make money.
Make money. No. Building podcasts is a slow burning process. It is very much a brick by brick by brick process. You start off with 10, you get 20 audience, you get 600, then 800. Moving towards your first, if audience size is important to you. If you're very, very niche, it might not be. Sam and Steve, for example, Sam and Steve Vaughan. Steve is one of our moderators. Their podcast is about invites other wedding suppliers, doesn't it? I think, and that's been a nice modest start for them. So it depends what you want to make your podcast about. If you're talking about kit, then you need a digital audio editing program. I personally use Audition. I like it because you can add in what's called compression, which beefs up the whole sound a little bit. We do get quite a lot of feedback saying, it sounds nice and radio-like. That's because we're going through, it's effectively a radio studio, this. So, it's not, there's a bit of investment in this, but you can just get yourself a recorder. I've got a couple here, H4, Zoom H4 or something, plug a couple of mics into it, and then run it through some compression with your digital audio workstation. Pop it up to something like Anchor. Anchor's a great hosting. You'll need a hosting service for your podcast. So you upload your audio files to Anchor. There's various, but that's the first one that comes to mind that's free. I use it and it's very good. We host this one in a different place. And there we go. You've got your podcast. Bang.
There you go. Simple, Gavin. Just go. You could do that probably the next hour or so, I would imagine. Be
Otherwise,
simple.
Indeed, come to me. And I'll do it for you.
All right, your question.
Oh, is it my turn?
Even though I made you answer that one.
There's a complaint. A couple of people wrote in on this one. Strangely not, John St. John Smith. Did you know about this, by the way?
I did. When you said St. John, I knew.
Did you know it?
You
never thought to correct me.
It'd be
you should have given me the... That's it. All the time. I've done that about half a dozen times.
I know.
A complaint. Anyway, a couple of people wrote in on this one, but as I say, John St. John Smith did not write in. Robert Pope did. Dear Neil, you are a heathen. John St. John Smith is pronounced John St. John Smith. Good show, though. Love, Robert.
Robert pronounced Bob.
Yeah, that's it. Pronounced James. So I do know that now. I feel corrected. John, funnily enough, he's coming along to the first. I keep saying 30th. We're not that old. The first birthday podcast. But Yeah, he he didn't correct me on it, but there we go.
No, because he's too...
I'm bouncing. It's like a tennis
polite.
match. Boom, back to you for an actual question.
Okay, so Tim Grace says, morning chaps, quick question for the start of 2020. I've been working now as a wedding photographer for 6 years. This will be my 7th. I've shot locally in the main, but I really want to get into destination weddings. What would be your advice, since I see you both do them? Here's to celebrate in 2030 with you guys too. At first I thought that was a mistake, but actually I think he's real.
10 years?
Yeah.
That would be a hell of a party, wouldn't it? Hey?
God, I don't know
I'll
if I
have
can
more
do
grey
it for
hair.
that long. Blimey. More grey hair.
Oh, hang on. I don't have hair.
2030. God, just the thought of it. How old will I be into?
You'll be times by 4, 72.
9. Yeah, nearly. Blimey. I'll have taken my highly effective government pension by then.
Do you think Gemma will still be with you?
Yes. Me and Gemma
to the bitter
joined
end.
at the hips.
Are you?
Yeah.
Moving on.
I was trying to think of the word conjoined twins. What's the word?
That's it. Conjoined twins.
And then I was going to say, we are conjoined by love.
Ah.
And then I cocked it up.
Pass me a bucket.
Totally forgot
please.
what it was. Okay,
Don't
so...
even remember what the question was now. I'm thinking about you and Gemma conjoined.
The question was about destination weddings.
Oh, yes. Well, myself and Kev have just been to Switzerland to do one. First rule, do not share a bedroom, because one of you will snore. And we're not saying which one.
Yeah, we did a lot of driving.
You have to ask yourself why you want to do them, first of all. Okay, is it because you really want to do them, or is it? And I'm using this with a small e. Is it ego?
Yeah. Do you want to be seen as shooting a destination
Yeah.
wedding? Yeah. So you can put it on your website.
Yeah. They are fun, but I wouldn't choose to do them. Philip White, for example, the videographer that we often talk about, I mean, most of his life is spent shooting wedding films abroad. And he's rarely, in some parts of the year, is rarely at home.
Yeah.
Because these are
high end.
It's not Switzerland. He's going down to the Bahamas and places like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Although I did once shoot a wedding with him in
Bethnal Green,
in Lincoln, in a barn in Lincoln.
In a barn in Lincoln, yeah.
And he did say, these come along too. Anyway, but yeah, you're quite right. I honestly wouldn't think that was the case for Tim, but there are people out there who are desperate to just be seen as doing destination weddings, so we'll do it basically for nothing or at an expense. You're going to hear from the flip side where other photographers will say, well, if you're away for 3 days, you travel on the Friday, shoot on the Saturday, come back on a Sunday, you should charge 3 full days wedding. I don't believe that myself personally. I mean, I do charge a higher rate for sure.
There's not many clients that would pay you
exactly. Yeah.
4 or 5 days worth just because you shot on 1.5 days.
And I have to say, I've done I don't know, maybe 15 or so of them last year.
Are they fun? Are they fun?
No, I mean, they're fun as in they're as fun as all the other weddings.
Yeah.
But no, there's nothing romantic about going to Bristol Airport on a Friday, stressing about your flight being on time, picking up a hire car the other side, driving for 3 hours on the wrong side of the road, shooting a wedding, beautiful wedding as it may be, getting back in that hire car, driving to Toulouse Airport
on the wrong side
of the road, worrying about French air traffic strikes, getting home, worrying about whether your memory cards have been sucked into the ether going through security, all of that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, I mean, of course, don't get me wrong, it is beautiful. I have some lined up this year which I'm really excited by, especially one in northern Germany. I've got one in Amsterdam.
Oh, that's the place you showed me, the one in Germany.
Yeah, the one in Germany.
That looks like the most amazing.
Yeah, if there's a reason to shoot a wedding, and for that one, I'm not particularly charging like an over exuberant amount, because it's something that I just really want to do. It's basically in a bubble in the Baltic Sea.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
right next to the coast, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
you
with
coast. Only about 10 people or something, isn't it?
Yeah, 7 or 8 people.
Amazing.
But yeah, otherwise, yeah, it's. If you like travel let's face it, Neil and I have got kids and wives and stuff, and so
I've got one wife.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I got one current wife.
Hang on a minute. you're in trouble.
And we want to get back, and it's, we're not going for a jolly, 3 or 4 days adventure afterwards. And if you're single and you're by yourself and you like travel, and basically shooting a wedding will facilitate you getting there for cheap or free, then absolutely go for it and do it and enjoy it.
Rewinding just a little bit though, if he really wants to get into them, is there a way of getting into?
That's a good point.
Do you contact the planners? Is that the best way to do it? How do you do it through Facebook advertising? I'm not sure that would work for this particular thing.
I would say.
How did you get? Because you do a lot more than me.
Yeah, but they nearly all come from either wedding planners or referrals. So a lot of the people who get married in a certain part of France, like that I've shot, they all seem to know each other, or they've all been guests at that wedding and various things like that. So yeah, I definitely didn't market for it. You won't go onto my website and see a page titled Destination Wedding. A bride is not going to type into Google Destination Wedding Photographer. That makes no sense.
But you optimize for that though, don't you?
No, I will optimize for, I have my French weddings in a category called French Wedding Photographer, or French Documentary Weddings or something. I can't remember exactly.
So soft categorization.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that Destination Wedding Photographer is not a term that anybody would search for.
Yeah, but good luck if you want to do them. They are good fun.
We went off on a bit of an angry ranting again. Good luck, Tim. Tell us when you do your first one.
And enjoy it.
Yeah, don't forget to enjoy it.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, Neil. Sorry, there's a few... I don't know why I'm apologising. Sometimes there's more wedding things than other weeks, but it's all photography. Hi, Kevin, Neil. Greg Smith of Huddersfield here. Oh, hello, Greg. I thought I'd write and tell you about the really, really cute tradition I came across while shooting a wedding over the Christmas period. During the church wedding service, the local kids tie up the gates of the church, Lich Gate, and won't let the bride and groom exit the church till they get some money. He attached a pic, actually. It was kids, sir, with the faces just peering over the gate. Give us your money. I don't know how long the tradition's been going on or if it happens elsewhere, but I thought you and your listeners might be interested, might be worth sharing. Does anybody know of any other quaint church traditions? I think I heard one of the kids' parents saying this tradition's been going on for about 100 years or so. Churches in South
Yorkshire.
Othrington in North Yorkshire.
It's a Yorkshire thing, yeah.
St Andrews. Oh, is it actually a Yorkshire thing?
Yeah. I've seen it a couple of times at weddings before. They've always been in Yorkshire. Yeah. And I asked one of the brides once, and she said, yeah, it's a Yorkshire thing.
Oh, okay.
So they do, the kids basically hold the lich gate shut, and then the bride and groom have to throw money in the air.
Is that right?
And they collect the money and then they let them out. Yeah.
I like that idea of the money thing at weddings. One of the traditions, obviously, at Greek and Turkish weddings, I think, as well, is money pinned on the bride, isn't it? And
Asian weddings, of course, the friends, the family, usually the sisters steal the shoes of the groom.
Oh, right.
And he has to pay them to get the shoes back.
Yes, of course, I've seen that. I think if ever I have another wedding, I might call it a Turkish wedding.
Just pretend. Yeah.
You don't look very Turkish, I know, but there's a little bit going back about 300 years.
I took it up recently. I took up being Turkish recently.
That's what we should do for me and Mrs. J's. I don't know, what's the next big wedding anniversary? Maybe our 20th or something. We'll have a Turkish wedding anniversary. Pin the money. How do they actually pin the money on without it?
Well, they have
pins through somebody's.
No, the ones I've seen, they have purpose-made plastic little wallet things that.
Well, so you have a special wedding dress with just little clips on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a. I really have no way of explaining it, but it's a purpose-built device for wedding dresses that you can hang on them, and people will stick 50 quid notes in there.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and pin them on there.
Oh well. There's something new that I've learned today. Some new features on the show then this week. You've heard the reintroduction of the book review, which is kind of backed by popular demand, Kev, isn't it? So thank you for your suggestions on that note. We brought back the Self-Indulgent Minute, which was a 1-minute roundup of the nice messages and reviews you've left mainly on the Apple podcast platform. We dumped the idea for a while, but then we brought it back just so we can say thank you in a kind of irreverent fashion. So we invented this imaginary place called the Coat of Ego, where it's always sunny thanks to your kind words. And it even has a jingle, doesn't it, Kev? Are you ready?
Go for it.
The Coat of Ego. Welcome. You fly in and straight away you're met by the cocktail waiter. Something very alcoholic, please. Don't mind if I do. Well, welcome to the Coat of Ego, which is our imaginary land, where we have an opportunity to thank you personally for some of the beautiful comments that you make on the reviews, which I think is suitable for an island just off the Italian coast.
Absolutely.
Called the Coat of Ego.
Coat of Ego.
Are you ready? You go for the first one.
All right. So I have one from... That was a good start.
Are we giving you a bad name?
That was a good start. No, the names are at the bottom rather than the top.
All right.
I thought his name was Vaccine for a moment, but
Well,
no, the name
maybe it is.
The name is Dave Trice.
All right.
And
Not Vaccine.
No, but his review starts with Vaccine to those Monday morning blues. Kevin and Neil are just incredible. Yada 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 yada. The podcast foster an awesome community of professionals and enthusiasts that engage with a really useful topic and insights. The community simply tee up many of the talking points, and Kevin and Neil's dynamic knock it out of the park. The weekly content is never lacking, with great interviews, lots of laughs, and some interesting, thought-provoking information. If you enjoy photography, no matter the market or the gear you utilise, you will enjoy yourself and will actually start looking forward to Monday for another round. Cheers.
Bilobog 1. That's a very strange name. A really entertaining listen, even if you are not a Fuji shooter. I listen religiously. Or, like Mishi, you mean, from last week's show. The hosts are extremely knowledgeable, and there's so much healthy banter between them. It's not just about Fuji either. The guests that participate coming from a variety of genres and backgrounds, which just adds another reason of why you should give it a whirl. I said a try, not a whirl. Sorry.
I miss Mishi. This is from Evo 1200.
Oh, Mishi, come back.
A Christmas delight. Gentlemen, this was truly a delight. He's referring to our Nativity episode, presumably.
Yeah, that was fun.
Neil is a brilliant producer, so the content is always perfectly crafted. Neil and Kevin and the wives are a blast. This was special, thoughtful, sweet, genuine. It arrived like a present to us listeners from your hearts. Boys, have a beautiful and blessed Christmas.
Well, we did.
And then may Christ's love and light shine on all of your family, you and your family. Cheers. Can't wait for 2020.
Well, you're there.
Indeed.
Thank you. At 0056, the best. I cannot get enough of you guys in the podcast. I've become a Fuji lover 6 months now, and there's no looking back. And to add this podcast, well, I can't say enough. I've listened to all the episodes more than once. That's called binge listening, isn't it?
That's more than I listen to them.
You guys are the best. Well, that's very kind. And of course, we have a little message to all those 4 people that wrote in a review. And we really mean this.
You're our favourite listener, and we mean it.
Right. Okay. Enough. We'll do another. But if you're sending in your reviews, you may well be featured next week. Another question. Then we'll finish on the 2 disaster stories that we have this week. Kev.
Okay, so I have a question from it's good old Ali Stewart again. Hi, Kevin.
Ali
Neil
sneaks in there, well, under the radar.
Got some good questions.
Flying in with another question.
Hi, Kevin, Neil. Happy New Year to you both. I'm looking forward to seeing what 2020 brings to this great FujiCast community that you've created. As we head into a new decade, what's your goals for the next year and the next decade? Where do you think wedding photography might be in 10 years' time as we head into the 30s?
I can't think of 1 week ahead, Ali. Do you make resolutions?
I don't really make resolutions, but I make kind of decisions that.
Do you?
So, for example, my New Year's decision this year, from a business point of view, is to firmly follow the profit first accountancy rule.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah,
and remain vegan.
Yeah, remain vegan.
Yeah.
But the profit first thing is made a big impact on me last year, and so I'm going to implement it at 100% this year. I will link to the Profit First stuff on our FujiCast page if you so wish, or we could talk about it. If anybody wants to talk about the Profit First technique, write an email in to click@fujicast.co.uk and we can talk about it.
Give us a sampler of.
It's basically an accounting principle where you use 5 different bank accounts to separate your income streams. So you have an operating account.
Sounds like tax avoidance.
No, it's not, because you have a tax account, you have a owner's compensation account, you have actually it's 4 accounts, and you everything that comes in you split on a percentage basis. So the idea is that you keep your tax accounts and your effectively savings accounts in hard to get to places. Bank accounts that have high interest. Remember them?
High interest?
Yeah. Some interest.
Remember the war?
During the war. Yeah. And so, it's really good. Really, really clever. But it's hard to enforce it. Yeah. So that's my resolution to myself. Okay. But I can talk about that further if anybody is more interested.
I think that's quite a good idea.
Yeah. Right. It's a book. Basically, it's a Profit First book. It's very famous. So Ali says, where do you think photography will be in 10 years' time?
We talked about the smartphone thing. It's a good chance that camera manufacturers, I think, will have a tough time as these smartphones get better and better and better and better. I wonder whether the camera manufacturers will go into the smartphone game. That was a long considered huff.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, from Fujifilm's point of view, they produce lenses for lots of different, like, osteoscopes and telescopes and, all of that kind of stuff.
Even stuff for the cosmetic industry as well, isn't it? So
Cosmetics, yes. They do all of that stuff. But
Fujifilm as an organisation is
huge. Huge.
They ain't just cameras.
No, absolutely. In fact, the digital imaging department is a tiny part of their business. I mean, I don't know about that blend between the smartphones and the cameras, physical cameras.
But chips will get even smaller.
Yeah.
So the likelihood is that you'll be able to make pictures with your glasses much more easily without people seeing that you're doing so. Street photography could become very intriguing.
Well, that's the point I was going to make about photography in the next 10 years wasn't so much about the technology, it was about the critical mass of perception that we're running headlong into, and this idea that you mustn't take a picture because of privacy, and the more that people like Facebook keep abusing our privacy rights, the more that's going to happen, and the less likelihood people are going to be comfortable taking pictures of. I can't see it being too not likely to happen. That didn't make any sense, did it?
I think we know where you are.
If in the future, in 10 years' time, you're taking a picture of your kids in the park and you actually have to go and blur out anybody else that happens to be in the park behind them,
it'll be easy by then. You just tap on your faces that need to be in focus, and everything else will be pixelated out. That's
it. I'm out at that point. Sorry, I'm going to go and I'm going to write vegan cookbooks.
Well, that's you'd be Well,
that would break my heart, though. It would, and it just takes all the interest out, and that's because I told you. Did I read you out that email I had from on my F16 website?
No.
You are a disgrace to Fujifilm being an ambassador. How dare you take pictures of strangers in the streets and put them on your website? What would you do if somebody took a picture of you and put them on your website? Now this was just regular street photography, and I was like, you know what? This is from a German guy. And I was like, I know the laws are different in your country, but when your kids grow up, they will have nothing to remind them of your naivety and your arrogance and your...
Oh, you bit back then?
Oh, I went right back at him.
That's not like you, Kev.
No, I did in that case. Because he got me on the Achilles heel, He did. And then it was a personal attack based on something inappropriate.
Yeah.
So that's my fear for photography.
Did he send you a Christmas card after that? No.
But yeah, so sorry, Ali. I've got another little angry rant.
Which seems a very good time to do our disasters, doesn't it? As our closing offering to you, Tony McKeon. We've got two rants, not two, two disasters. Do you want me to rip this in half and give you one of them?
Okay.
There we go.
Don't bring my blood pressure down.
Yeah. Okay, let's just... I'm never able to do that rip thing. Hold on, here we go. There we go.
Well done.
So I'll start with Tony McKeon's. Hello, gents. Loving the podcast, right blend of information and humour. I'm not a wedding photographer, not a pro at all, but a sort of keen amateur. Some time ago, I was backing up the latest of my photos from an external drive to my file server. I can already see this going south. And halfway through, the house suffered a lightning strike. It fried both devices, and I lost every photo I have ever taken. 5 years worth of images, all gone, save for the ones I'd printed or had on memory cards, which wasn't many. My heart sank and I lost all motivation to take photos again. I sold all my gear, and I'm only just taking tentative steps back in again. With 3 levels of backup now, I'm not surprised. I'll have more than that, I think. Tony, but that is a proper disaster. Hasn't even got a funny end, that one.
No, that's... Yeah. Oh, I'm just going to go straight on to Bjorn then. Bjorn Mowerman.
Yep.
Mowerman. A couple of years ago, I bought a fancy shutter release button for my pretty new XT2. To my frustration, the button kept falling off. One night there might have been some grape juice involved. I grabbed some Loctite and came up with a great plan of gluing my shutter release button to the camera.
No.
One little drop of super glue into the shutter buttonhole, followed by an immediate installation of the button. What could possibly go wrong?
I wonder.
Some of the glue started overflowing, immediately gluing the shutter button in the fully pressed down position. How stupid can you be? Oh, and did I tell you I'm an ex-photographer?
Oh, no.
Please don't mention my name. Oh, sorry, Bjorn. Yeah, sorry. Bjorn Moerman. Yeah.
Job done. I thought for a minute he was going to say he glued his finger to the shutter button. That would have been dreadful as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
There we go. These disasters are great. We'd really like you to send them in, please. So,
Yes.
so click at fujicast.co.uk is the address to send them into. So make sure you send those not Fuji disasters.
No, anything.
Anything. Any photographic disaster was what I was trying to say. And that's it this week. Thank you for your company, and thank you indeed to our guest, Cathal McNaughton. And the links, of course, to Cathal's work will be in the show notes. If you've liked this week's show, then please take a moment and share it. We'll consider you legendary material. And if you haven't yet gone in... Oh, by the way, the Apple Podcast reviews are great too. Do you actually go into the Apple Podcast reviews?
Yeah. Keep them coming. They're really important for the algorithms and the rankings and all of that other good stuff. Only say nice things, though.
Yeah. Have you joined the private Facebook group yet? If you haven't, we are waiting in there to say hello to you. It's a safe place to share your thoughts and opinions. And you can ask some questions in there as well. I think you'll find that people are quite generous with their replies. It's not like some of the groups where people sort of attack you for wait, you don't know the answer to that. It's not that kind of group at all.
No, it's all good.
Thank you for your questions, your thoughts, your comments, and even the odd whinge, because without them we'd be scuppered. It would all end quicker than a vicar turning up for a Saturday night cheese and wine do, only to find out he got the wrong date and it showed up in the neighbourhood swingers party night instead. Send them in via the website address. Click at fujicast.co.uk. Music from Blue Wednesday. Supporting music from Art List. And if you'd like to see our offerings to the photo community and world, there is one address that you need to go to now.
Learn about the kit Neil and Kevin use, get links to all their websites, and find out first about any new workshops coming up by going to www.fujicast.co.uk/the boys.
And we will see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.